Hi guys, I'm Carly Yost, the CEO and founder of Child Rescue Coalition. I'm really excited you guys are joining us here today for our summer safety series. And I know that COVID has changed a lot in our lives, and Child Rescue Coalition is still working here virtually around the world to keep kids safe. And it's actually been a great opportunity for us to bring expert speakers from all over to be able to talk to you and educate us all about safety tips and how to keep children safe. So I'm really excited that our first virtual summer speaker series is bringing my good friend, Greg Schiller, who is Assistant U.S. attorney, who really specializes in child sex crimes and has been an expert in this field forever. Greg, you are one of my biggest heroes in child protection. So really, if I had to name my top 3 heroes who have taught me so much, you are one of them, with John Walsh and Bill Wiltsey, I would say, are my top 3 heroes. So Greg has just taught me so much when it has to do with this space of how to keep kids safe, and really is a true example of someone who's out there in the field protecting children every single day. So I'm really excited to welcome you, Greg.
Well, thanks so much, Carly. I really appreciate being here. And obviously the work that Child Rescue Coalition does, assisting law enforcement, in putting their software together, goes hand in hand. So I'm glad I can be here, and I'm glad we can talk through some of these issues that I know a lot of parents out there are very nervous about.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for your time. And just a reminder to all of you guys who are watching, please share this with your friends. And you can also ask us questions. So at the end, I'll be posing some of the comments and questions to Greg that he'll be able to answer live. And definitely share this with your friends so we can get the message out there and be able to get more exposure for Child Rescue Coalition and just more safety tips to parents in general on how to keep their kids safe. So let's get started. All right, so Greg, as the U.S. State's Attorney, can you just explain to everyone what it is that you do and how you're able to keep children safe and identify predators as well?
Sure. Well, the United States Attorney's Office is the federal prosecuting arm of the United States government. We have obviously offices throughout the entire country. Our office here in South Florida is the Southern District of Florida, and Ariana Fajardo-Orshon is the appointed U.S. Attorney. And I can tell you, since she's taken over and to allow us to do our work, protecting children online has been a massive priority for her and for our office. So basically what happens is law enforcement receives information about child victims online or possible predators online, and then a prosecutor gets involved. And if it's a federal case, that is me or one of the many prosecutors in my office or around the country that do what we do. And so we're the ones in court fighting on behalf of victims' rights and trying to do justice against individuals who are perpetrating young children online for their own pleasure.
And in your career, being an expert in this and prosecuting these type of sexual predators, how many offenders do you think you've identified?
Well, identified and then prosecuted are 2 different things. Obviously, I know that you know that. And I would say, as far as, identified, I mean, law enforcement identifies hundreds of predators every single day. I began my work prosecuting internet crimes against children back in 2009 when I was a state prosecutor, and continued that in 2016 when I moved over to the U.S. Attorney's Office. And over that time, I've prosecuted over 250 online offenders, either for producing child sexual abuse material, distributing it, receiving it, or trying to solicit children to meet them for illicit sexual encounters.
And so I've known you, now since my early 20s, and really have just been an amazing mentor for me and someone I've learned so much from. But would you share with our viewers how you first got connected to Child Rescue Coalition and using the technology and really the impact that you've had on our organization?
Well, sure. So it's a long story, but I'll keep it brief for the viewers. But back in 2009, the Child Rescue Coalition really established in Boca Raton in Palm Beach County. And then State Attorney Michael McCullough, who I worked for, wanted to put a task force together to work hand in hand with the organization that was able to acquire lead information for law enforcement and identify online sexual predators. So I was the guy who raised his hand and said, sure, I'll take that on. Why not? Like most people out there, I didn't know what child sexual abuse material really was. And then I got to see how horrendous it was. Little kids, infants, toddlers being abused, and just the images and videos of that being distributed online for anyone to see if you knew where to look, and that's not hard. So I was there and worked with law enforcement, and the lead data that Child Rescue Coalition offered that we had access to, that the entire country and the world has access to if you're in law enforcement. And with that information, we were able to bring forth subpoenas and search warrants and arrests. And like I said earlier, yield hundreds of prosecutions and convictions and what we consider appropriate punishments for those individuals. The driving factor behind the reason we do all this is because law enforcement and prosecution know that individuals that are online, either trading or disseminating or receiving child sexual abuse material or looking for kids online are very likely to do so in person. So that's our motivating factor to try to stop these individuals, hopefully before they've actually had a chance to do that. But if they've already done it, at least we can try to arrest them for these crimes.
Yeah, well, it's been an amazing history, and you've been such a big motivation. And what we're doing is to allow investigators and officers the ability to more effectively identify these predators. And I mean, watching you guys, Palm Beach County in particular has just been a leader with how to prosecute and really take very seriously a serious issue of protecting children. And so it's been a great thing to be helping and to be part of a community that really takes this so seriously.
Absolutely.
So let's get into how parents can actually help their own children. So some safety tips for parents. Where do kids have the most problems online?
Well, yeah, I'd love to talk about that. Besides being a prosecutor, one of the things that I have done, gosh, since 2009 is gone into schools and community groups and parent organizations, basically anyone who will listen to my voice outside of a jury, and try to send a message of how we need to keep our kids safe online. So I have a couple of slides that we can run through. I think it'll be helpful. The slides, I didn't produce them, just as a little disclaimer there. They're all produced by the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children. And the slides are what I use in my presentation. It's not the full presentation, but I think it'll help us talk through some of the things. Okay, so is the first slide up on the screen, Carla?
Yes, it is.
Okay. So these are the areas where kids have the most issues online. This is what parents worry about. And I think the biggest concern that law enforcement has, certainly I have, and I'm a parent and I've got a bunch of kids at home. Some of them might be watching right now, I'm not sure. But is that we don't know what we don't know. And that's a real scary thing. Imagine walking into a cave and having no idea what's there. You think it might be dangerous, but you don't know what to expect. Our kids have grown up online since they were born, and we as parents haven't. So we need to really understand what dangers are affecting them. The problem is none of this affected us when we were kids. So it's hard to conceptualize what kids are going through. And we'll get into that maybe a little later, I think, in the presentation. But these are the things that we have to be concerned about. Our kids seeing inappropriate content, online privacy, our children's privacy being taken, sexting, which is the sending of images, videos, or words about sex to children, online enticement to get images or videos from the children or have them meet online or meet in real life, excuse me, or cyberbullying. We're not going to talk about the last one too much. I will tell you that at least Palm Beach County Schools does an amazing job focusing on cyberbullying. and they're kind enough to allow me to come into the schools on a regular basis to discuss the other issues as well. But let me give you an analogy. Imagine when the car first came out, and everybody before that had been riding on horse and buggy. And here comes the car. And all the young people say to themselves, wow, this is incredible. I don't have to, sit behind a horse that might smell a little bit. If it breaks down, I just get someone to fix it. I don't have to shoot it and get a new one. This is great. And those are like the kids, our kids, when it comes to the internet. It's easy, they get it, they use it, it's part of their lives. But back in the olden days, when the car came out, the old folks, and that's us, and our parents, when they saw the car, they thought, oh, who needs this? This is not for me, it's complicated, it's unknown. And there became a divide. Now, I wasn't there, obviously, to see it, but I know what it looks like today. And when it comes to the internet, parents don't have the knowledge to understand these dangers that their children are facing because they didn't. We understand drunk driving and using drugs because our parents talked to us till they were blue in the face about being safe on those things. So we're fine talking to our kids about it because we experienced learning that. But this is different because we didn't grow up with it. So we have got to get onto the ground level and understand what our kids are going through.
That's so true. Such a good point. And I get asked that all the time is, where do we start? How do we talk to our children? Even at different ages, where do we begin? What do we say to our children?
Right. So we have to talk to our kids depending on their age. And I'll be honest with you, Carly, if your kid is 2 years old and sitting at home on an iPad, you got to talk to them. What we don't want to happen is we don't want kids to learn about the birds and the bees. And I'm trying to be PG as possible because there might be some kids watching. But we need kids to learn the truth about the world, the dangers of the world from us, and not from websites that show video content and teach them what we don't want them to know. So for our young kids, even the little ones, there's this idea that the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children has come up with called Netiquette. At the dinner table, we want our kids to have elbows off, chewing with their mouth closed, don't talk while you eat. Well, that's etiquette, right? Netiquette is the idea of using etiquette on the web. So when you're communicating, you're speaking appropriately. You're not visiting websites you're not supposed to. We need to explain to them that there's inappropriate content out there and they're not supposed to look. The younger ones don't understand that searching the web is just possibly dangerous. They think, oh, there's Google and I can access what I want. We need to put parameters in place. Hey, before you do a search, come and ask me first. And if you start that at a very young age, that will just become the nomenclature of your house. It'll be what they expect to do. Tell them if something pops up on your screen, don't ever click on it. Don't share passwords. And as important as anything, we can't trust anyone we meet online. When I do internet safety presentations in schools, and I'm talking to 4th and 5th graders especially, one of the things I like to tell them is, so if you have Twitter and I have Twitter, and we are standing next to each other with our phones, and you ask to follow me, and I say, sure, and you follow me, and I see on my phone that you're following me, and I say, is this you? And you say, yes. That's the safest way to do it. Anything else where you're not physically in person following each other, liking each other, friending each other, you have no idea who that person could be. And that's the danger of the internet. When it comes to the older kids, we've really got to talk about the dangers that I've already mentioned. Cyberbullying, sexting, posting inappropriate material, and absolutely not meeting in real life a person you've met online.
Right.
Again, I think kids think that and I know because I've talked to them and even my own victims in my cases, they live in a bubble essentially where they think the internet is a safe, secure world different from the real world. Now, as adults, we know there's no difference. It's just an extension of the real world, but kids don't see it that way. And we need to make sure they understand that there's a difference.
Yeah, gosh, and it can be even more dangerous than the real world because you're opening yourself up to all kinds of people all over the internet. And as we know, there are predators that are using all different types of online platforms, really any kind of platform that exists, there are predators that are on there, and that they do seek out places to find and contact children. So what do you think is the most important tips for keeping children safe from predators contacting them, and what should parents know specifically about how to avoid a predator from contacting them?
Yeah, it's a great question, Carly, and some of the slides talk to that point exactly. So as parents, we need to understand something. We are, and you have to admit this to yourself as a parent, and I do, and my wife does, even though we've got experience in this because of my work and what we've been trying to do with our own family is to try to keep our children safe. We have to admit to ourselves that we just don't know what's going on, and when we don't know about something, we're a little scared of it. And when we're scared of something, we don't approach it and attack it. So we need to. And to do that, we need to express to our kids what's okay and what's not okay. We've got to set ground rules. For example, pictures of family and friends. Well, that might be okay to share and receive with others, but you have to make sure that the family and friends that you're sharing things with aren't just going to take those images and post them online. See, the concern is so large. It's not just our child talking online with a stranger who's going to possibly take advantage of them and ask them for child sexual abuse material or try to meet them in person, but even regular pictures online of our kids. We don't know what anyone's doing with that information. And so we have to teach them that you have to be careful who you share pictures of when it comes to family and friends. Personal information. We don't share our address, our phone number, our email address, our any of our online account information just to post it online and share with people. If we're texting it to a friend so we can engage on a social networking app, for example, you're texting your friend because you want to meet on Facebook Kids, Facebook Messenger for kids, well, we got to make sure mom and dad are aware of that because that's sharing information. We don't have conversations with unknown people in online games. I don't think, and I know this because the parents I've spoken to by the thousands, parents don't really understand that video games are the internet. When we were kids and we had Tetris and Zelda and Mario Brothers, you played against the computer. Now the only play on a video game, whether it's Xbox, PlayStation, Wii, or any of the portable systems, is you're playing against people. That's the fun of it. And to enhance the experience, you can communicate to them if there's a keyboard, you can send messages, and you can also live video chat with them. We have no idea who these people are. I myself have prosecuted cases where individuals were chatting in a video game with a minor, got the minor to produce sexually explicit material of himself. And it turned out that the person who was doing this was not another kid that the kid thought it was, and they were just joking around, but actually a 35-year-old registered sex offender. If kids are somewhere, those who want to offend against kids and sex offenders who have already offended against kids will be there as well.
Yeah, that's such a great point, is that, we warn children not to be talking to anyone that's not our friend. And these gaming platforms are almost providing, a back door that predators can pose and pretend like they're gaining this friendship with a child and really gain their trust. And it's still a person that they don't know, even if they've been playing with them for years, and can potentially be a serious threat.
Without a doubt. And there's one other thing that most people don't even know their phones are doing. And that is you're sharing your location information every time you share a picture or video. In the settings of all of our phones, there's an application where you can disable your camera from recording the latitude and longitude of exactly where you are when you capture that image and video. Because if you don't, when you share that information with people, just by right-clicking on the image or bringing up the properties of that image, they can see the latitude and longitude of where you were when you took it. So if you're a kid and you took a picture of yourself in your bedroom and you send it to someone, that someone could possibly know where you were when you took it. And that's very, very dangerous. One of the things that we need to teach our kids are simple physical things to protect themselves. If they feel uncomfortable, scared in any way, they need to know to either turn off the screen, use the back button, X out of the app, tell a trusted adult, report it to the website or app they're using, or report it to the Cyber Tipline. The last one we'll talk about in a little bit. But I think it's important for parents to know that our kids, when they're online, they are in what they feel is their safest place. Nobody's bothering them. They're having the freedom to explore the world. If your child comes to you and expresses something that's happened to them online, or you see a change in their demeanor, and they're young, so you know it's probably not drugs or alcohol. And with everyone being home, we know where our kids are all the time now. You gotta imagine that it might be, and likely is, something that's happening online. Our initial response to our kid, if they do something online they're not supposed to, maybe something happened to them and it was late at night when they should have been sleeping, or they were on an app or a website they didn't ask permission for. Well, our initial reaction as parents might be to get upset. And the moment we do that, we lose our trust and faith in our child that they can confide in us. We have to approach the situation as if, and which is true, that they are a victim of something. Someone has done something to our child. We didn't see it, and we don't understand it because it didn't happen to us when we were kids. But we have to approach them that way so they will come to us and they will trust us. And let them know if it's not us, maybe it's another family member or a school resource officer or a teacher. So these are things we've got to express to our kids on the front side to give them tools for their toolbox. So should something happen, they know what to do.
I think that's a great point. And I've seen you actually give some of your presentations when you were presenting to young kids about safety tips, as well as parents and all different age groups. And it's really amazing that you're getting the word out there of how to protect children, and what children should be doing. And one really interesting aspect that you taught these kids was that it's not only parents' role to be on the front line of this kind of activity that's happening. And unfortunately, children are most likely going to be contacted by a predator when they're using the internet or using different gaming devices. So it was the concept of you teaching them that they're part of being on the front line of fighting this, that they have to be as aware as well and know the right steps to do. I just thought that was a great concept and really empowering to the kids to say that there's something that they can do to put a stop to this.
Well, thanks, Carly. I appreciate that. And I guess you were at a presentation where the kids actually stayed quiet, which was unique. The kids are great when we do the presentations, and generally, like by the end, their jaws are usually on the floor, some of them, because they're shocked about what I'm able to tell them we know of the dangers out there that they had no idea. It's not parents' fault, right? Because like I said before, parents don't know what they don't know. That's why hopefully those of you watching are now learning these things. But you're right. Kids are on the front line and they've got to report these things. So if we don't talk to them in advance and empower them to report when something happens, even if it's minute, even if they report to us all the time and we're like, okay, that's not a big deal, don't worry about it. If we shut that down, when something bad does happen, they're going to be afraid to come to us. They're going to be afraid to come to the police because there's a stigma attached to reporting. And I got to tell you, Carly, it's unfortunate, but boys report so much less than girls. And I'll explain why briefly. Most offenders, not all, but the majority, overwhelming majority of offenders are adult men. People ask me all the time, what does your typical offender look like? And I say male, 18 to 75.
Wow.
I've prosecuted a few women, but most of them are men. And when an offender is pretending to be a girl and receiving sexual abuse material that a child, especially a boy, has produced, and then the boy finds out that that girl is not a girl, but really an adult man, and that boy either is homosexual, heterosexual, isn't sure what they are yet, but it's embarrassing for them. And again, it shouldn't have to be this way, but unfortunately that's our society a lot of the time. The boys are very, very reluctant to come forward because of that. And so it's so important that, of course, we talk to all kids, but we've got to make it very clear to our children. Anything that happens to them online by an adult is not their fault. And we have to say that over and over and over again, because they need to conceptualize that fact that if somebody does something to them, it's not their fault. And if it's not their fault, they're not going to get in trouble. And they've got to come forward and tell mom and dad or grandma and grandpa or a school resource officer or somebody they trust. Because we know that online offenders don't offend against just one child. They always have. I have had rare circumstances where any of the defendants I've prosecuted only had one victim. And so
And I
if we
think
can,
that's something kids don't understand. They do think it's something they did, right? And they think maybe they're the only ones that this happened to. So really trying to break that mold or that way of thinking to know that, you know, it really wasn't anything that they did, that is their fault, and that this person's probably doing this to a lot of people.
right, right. And kids have a false sense of security and relationship with the people they meet online. Some of them even fall in love. A lot of them fall in love with the offender, thinking they're the only one. And if they knew there were others, they certainly wouldn't. They'd be very upset. And so kids need to know, if this happens to you, it's not only happening to you. Please protect somebody else and yourself by telling us.
Absolutely. Another question that we get all the time is apps that kids are using. We talked about the games being a dangerous place where predators go to find and access children. But what about all these apps that kids are using? And specifically, what are ones that pose a potential danger?
Sure. Well, if everyone has the next 3 hours, we can talk about this, but I know we don't. This was a slide that was put together by a sheriff's office in Florida. And I like this slide because it kind of talks about the top apps where kids are, predators are, and parents don't even know. So I'm going to zoom in on this just so we can talk about a few of them. I know most parents know about Meet Me and WhatsApp because they use these as well. But, you know, these are communication apps. And our kids have to understand that when you communicate online and you're communicating with people you don't know, that some of those people could be predators. Of course, whenever we share anything online, Snapchat's an interesting one because, you know, you're sharing an image with someone thinking that it's going to disappear. But that person you send it to could screen capture it and share it with the rest of the world. Some other apps, TikTok is obviously very, very popular right now amongst kids, especially everyone being home during the coronavirus. And they're posting they're posting their videos online. Yeah. Now, I'm not disparaging any app whatsoever. I want to make that very clear. All apps have a productivity level to them, but we have to use them safely. And, you know, with TikTok, you're sharing videos of yourself in your home, usually, and showing that to the world. Well, that's private information. Snapchat, like I talked about, you're sharing images, and you don't know what people are going to do with them. We'll get back to that calculator at the bottom. There are other communication apps like Scout and Kik, where kids go just to meet people, having no idea that some of the people they might be communicating with are online predators. And Kik is very popular for that right now, as there are a lot of these others. Again, if kids are going to go to use the app, so are predators. When I do my presentations, I ask parents all the time, I show them the picture of the Kik app and I say, what do you think it is? And I always ask dads. And the dad's first response is, oh, it must be some kind of soccer game. Right. There's nothing about the app that tells you it's a communication app. Same with Scout. But that's what it is. So if we don't know what our kids are doing, then we can't possibly protect them and educate them on the dangers of that app. If your kid's using Kik and you don't know what it is, how can you protect them? And there are other apps out there that are designed to make apps that you have secret. So for example, you can download an app that looks like a calculator and it will, and that's all it is. It looks like a calculator. And so if you're a parent, you see, oh, look, my kid's got the calculator that comes with his iPhone. Oh, and another calculator app. They must love math. Well, that second calculator app actually hides other apps behind it. So when you open it up and you press 1, it opens Facebook. And when you press 2, it opens Twitter. And when you press 3, it opens Snapchat. So it's designed to protect the apps you don't want people to see that might have access to your phone. Again, if we're not in touch with what our child's doing and we're not familiar with the apps, we're not going to know. Now, I just want to say this one thing. This is daunting for parents. This is overwhelming because if you look at your kid's phone, they might have dozens or even hundreds of applications. And you need to know what those apps are. You need to review them before they get downloaded, make sure they're safe. And if there is communication available, talk to your child about the dangers of those.
Yeah, absolutely. It can be scary when there's so many apps out there. Try to know what each of them do, and especially ones like that calculator that can hide, and you really have no idea for the intended purpose of it. So it's a great tip and resource for parents to know. And also wanted to ask, so if you think your child has been contacted by a predator, if you suspect any kind of abuse has happened, or they've been communicating with one, where should children know to report this to? Where should parents know to report this to? And what should they do?
It's a great question. So we have to make sure that we talk to them about online relationships and set a policy about meeting offline, which should be no. Know who our child's online friends are, teach them the warning signs. But I think more to your point, how do we report it? And I will tell you that in a number of my cases that I've had over the last 10 years, I've been doing this work since 2009. Most of the kids that we are finding that are being victimized are communicating with online predators when they think nobody's watching them, or they're not supposed to be using it, so nobody's going to watch them at 2 a.m. in the morning, in the backyard when everybody's online doing something in the house. So if they weren't allowed to use the device at a certain time and they think they're going to get in trouble for it and the device is going to get taken away, they will be more apt not to report it to you or call the police. Now, I have been working with law enforcement since I became a prosecutor in 2003. It's the only job I've ever had since I finished my schooling. And law enforcement does an absolutely amazing job. But depending on where you live, law enforcement may not have the necessary tools or training to deal with an online offense. And I always like to tell people that you should call 911 and you should call the police if your child's being victimized online. But there's another resource that everyone needs to know about, and it's called the Cyber Tipline. It's basically 911 for the internet. So Carly, if you don't mind, if we could talk about that for just a minute.
Yeah, absolutely.
So the Cyber Tipline is put out by the National Center of Missing Exploited Children. Now, if God forbid your child were home alone and somebody broke into the house, hopefully they would know to grab a phone, run into the bathroom, lock the door, and dial 911. But what if your child's at home online at night and somebody sends them an inappropriate photograph or asks them to send obscene material of themselves of a sexual nature, or asks them to meet in person, and they're afraid to talk to you as the mom or dad or grandma, grandpa, or anyone else? There's a way they can report on their own, and it's called the Cyber Tipline. It's put together by the National Center of Missing Exploited Children, and it literally is the national clearinghouse for tips. They receive thousands and thousands of tips a week, not just from kids and parents and educators, but Facebook, Google, all the electronic service providers are required to report any of the material you see on your screen right now to the National Center if it's occurring. And so when a child wants to report something, they just type in Cyber Tipline on their phone or on the internet on their computer, and the screen pops up. They can enter what happened to them. They can be anonymous about it and report to the Cyber Tipline, which is in Washington, D.C. And then they decide which is the best law enforcement agency to receive that information, because maybe the person reporting says, hey, I'm in Tulsa, Oklahoma, or they get an email address and then they try to identify where that email is coming from. If they can see, oh, it's in South Florida, we'll send it to the Sheriff's Office, Homeland Security, the FBI down here in South Florida, and then they can begin investigating the case. More often than not, cases that are reported to the Cyber Tipline by a kid don't even need that child's involvement because of the information that is able to be investigated and garnered by law enforcement to put cases together. It's an amazing tool, and it allows a child to report maybe something they don't think is so bad, but should be reported. Because as we've talked about, individuals who are offending against kids online don't have just one. They typically have more than one. So this is a great tool. I hope every parent learns about it. Go to the Cyber Tipline with your kid, learn how to use it, and make sure they know how to use it.
Great. Um, so let's switch back off your slides to speaker view again. There we go. Now we can see it bigger.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to check in with all of our viewers. So again, we're with Assistant U.S. Attorney Greg Schiller, who specializes and is a complete expert at prosecuting child sexual crimes, and then also giving tips to children and parents of how to avoid this kind of behavior. So again, thank you to our viewers. Please share this and keep the comments coming through. I've actually, we've had quite a few comments saying that this is so helpful. Thank you, Greg. This information is so important. That Netiquette is good digital citizenship. So we're getting a lot of appreciation for the information you're sharing. Let's see. So keep the questions coming. I think a lot of people were interested in how to turn off the location services. So I don't know, when you take a picture, if you want to give a little bit more information on that, how to make sure you're not sharing your location.
Yeah, well, I can do that real quick. If you just go to the settings app, I'll tell you for an iPhone because I know iPhones, but if you go to the settings app on your iPhone and you go to location services, so you go to settings and you go to privacy. Privacy is that little hand that you never seem to go to, but it's there. And then you go location services, you can actually click on each app shutting off whether you're sharing your location information. If you shut it off for maps, it won't work, obviously.
Right.
But shut it off for the camera, then it won't record that information.
Well, that's a great tip. Actually, someone just asked if this information is available in Spanish or different languages. Are they able to go on to NCMEC and download this information?
Yeah, so the National Center does an amazing job with all of their internet safety materials. You basically can get everything I'm talking about except the PowerPoint slides, but all the information of the PowerPoint slides is available through their programs. They've got videos for kids ages basically newborn and up. They're amazing introductions to kids to really see what's going on in the world and the dangers. Everything's in multiple languages. And if there isn't a language there, you can reach out to the National Center and I'm sure they'll figure out a way to make it happen.
Yeah, I'm glad you showed parents and our viewers how to report a tip. So a lot of times people hear Child Rescue Coalition and know that we're directly in the business of identifying child predators and that we're able to track anyone's in possession of a child sexual abuse material, video, or image. And we directly lead to the arrest of thousands of predators. But one thing we aren't able to do is take in individualized tips. So there's a lot of parents out there that are writing us and they know they've been contacted by a predator. So it's really great information that you're showing them. The National Center, who we've partnered with to make sure that all of the leads coming to us get directed to them, and that making sure that law enforcement is following up on all of those leads. So really great information.
Yeah, and just to piggyback on that, Carly, the law enforcement officers that receive these cyber tips are generally the same officers trained on the Child Rescue Coalition software and other investigative techniques. So usually that officer, whether they're an internet crimes against children detective or a special agent for FBI or Homeland Security or Secret Service or other federal agencies, have all of these resources at their disposal. So when one tip comes in from one area, they're checking all of their resources to see where else this individual may have been by IP address, email address, etc.
Yeah, that's great. And really all of us as child exploitation nonprofits really have to be working hand in hand. And we're big supporters of the work that the National Center is doing and making sure that law enforcement is getting full picture of all the information that's going out there. So you touched on this. I wanted to talk now more about the predators and some of their activity and why this work is so important. But you did talk about a little bit about the likelihood of a child having to testify in court. But I want to expand on that this is a big reason why children aren't always coming forward or sharing their stories. Can you talk about how often a child has to testify in your cases and maybe alleviate some of their fears when it comes to this?
Sure, absolutely. I was actually just talking with a victim this morning over a video conference because we can't meet in person right now because of the pandemic. And I expressed to her what I'll say to you and everyone watching now, which is the percentage of kids that actually have to testify in court for online sexual abuse cases is very small. If you think about it, most arrests that happen result in usually the defendant pleading guilty. That's just the way the federal and the states and the local systems work, because evidence is brought and it's usually quite substantial and strong. But in the situation where cases do go to trial, and again, it is a very small percentage. I don't want to put a number on it because every jurisdiction is different, but it is smaller than the number of cases, obviously. A lot of times kids don't even have to testify. And that might be because the evidence that we've uncovered, either from the defendant's device or from the child's device or from the online service provider that is retaining all the emails or photos or videos, might be enough that we don't even need the child to testify. And so if a child or a parent are thinking about, oh gosh, you know, should we report this? I don't want to have to get involved with the police. And what if my kid has to? Don't worry about that. Let's cross that bridge if and when we get to it, which is a very unlikely situation. I'm not saying it won't happen. It does. And I've had child victims on the stand. But it's a rare circumstance. And kids need to report these things because, again, as you stressed, Carly, one child is not the only victim of an offender. Offenders typically have more than one. And so if the first one comes forward, we can stop the others from being victimized.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's really great that that children don't have to testify all of the time because it's really a traumatic thing. And you've talked about courts now being so sensitive now to victims. So it's really a great move that we're seeing that and not having to put them on the stand if we don't need to. So
Yeah.
That's one of the things we're most proud of at Child Rescue Coalition is that having the black and white data behind it and being able to prosecute someone purely on possession charges alone. So even if there are child victims, a lot of times prosecutors are able to move forward with just the possession charges of the child sexual abuse material and not have to subject children to going through that kind of legal really nightmare and really bringing up all those issues again. So anytime we can make sure, and we urge investigators all across the world to make sure that you're signed up and using CPS or Child Rescue Coalition's technology because it's available for free. And even if there is a child victim that's out there, an officer could be getting their IP address, looking it up in our system, and just collecting more data for a prosecution against that offender.
Yeah, I mean, look, you know, as a prosecutor, we want every single bit of evidence there is in favor of conviction and exculpatory material that shows that the defendant maybe didn't commit the crime. We want to make sure that we're getting it right. And the data we receive is just tremendous and helps lead to appropriate and successful prosecutions.
Yeah, absolutely. So when talking about how important this is, so our mission at Child Rescue Coalition is to identify anyone who is in possession of these illegal files. And many of them, as you know, they're not trading. It's not just 15, 16, 17-year-olds. This is often children that are younger than 5 years old being abused, victimized, and then traded around the world. So a serious felony for everyone that they're in possession of. But in your experience and you working directly with identifying these predators, why is this type of crime so important to go after? And how likely is it that these offenders could be hands-on abusers as well?
Well, it's a great question. And that topic has been debated and discussed by psychologists and courts around the country for a couple of decades now, ever since a real push was made into trying to stop internet crimes against children. And so there's no simple answer to it. There are studies out there, and one that I reference in court quite often is referred to as the Butner Study. And there have been many other studies since. But the idea behind that study and some of the other ones suggests that individuals who do possess child exploitation material and receiving it and distributing it, possessing it, producing it even online, have in the past offended against a child. And the numbers are staggering. Now, like any study, you have to look at that particular group that was in the study. And some studies have found that's not exactly the case, but in most of the cases that are prosecuted and that where arrests are made, like I said before, we don't just find that one victim. Or if it's an undercover officer posing as a child in a chat, it's not just that. There is something else uncovered on the device, on the phone, or in the cloud that leads us to other victims. So we know this is the case. Sometimes we don't find that evidence, and that's obviously made known to the court. This was the only case that we found of this nature. But we do know a lot of these individuals do solicit multiple people online, multiple children online, and we have to be aware of that.
And where would you say the majority of predators find kids online?
Yeah, I think as we discussed before, it's wherever kids are going to be. So if TikTok is hot right now, predators are going to be on TikTok. If Kick is hot right now, predators are going to be on Kick. And, listen, when we were kids, I'm sure your parents told you, and I know my parents told me, beware of strangers. Because when you walked out at night with your friends to the corner store or wherever, if a stranger came up to you, you were afraid, oh, this person, he's wearing a trench coat, he might flash you, or you might get abducted. That is not the biggest concern that we have right now. It happens, of course, absolutely. And you hear about it in the news all the time. But kids, because they're online, are giving predators direct, unfettered access to them all day, all the time, at their own home. And they are being abused when those images and videos are being disseminated to predators. Because a kid might be communicating with someone else online, thinking it's another kid, having no idea that it's actually an adult who's then going to take those images and share them with their world of like-minded individuals.
Right.
And then law enforcement happens upon the image one day and says, oh, we've never seen this image before. And it turns out it was taken 10 years ago by a girl who was 13 and is now 23. And this happens every day. And we uncover this material every day.
Actually, a question came in on our Facebook Live about if parents are to allow kids to use some of those apps, like a TikTok, for example. Is it okay if it's a private account? Would you still allow it? Do you have advice about that?
Yeah, so I told you at the beginning, I'm a parent myself, and I never like to tell other parents how to parent their kid. But I think when it comes to any app, whether it's TikTok, Facebook, Google, it doesn't matter, anything. You have to decide how much you're going to allow your child to use. And when you do that, you're deciding it and should be deciding it based on what the capabilities of that app are. So if the app allows them to communicate all the time, share their location all the time, are you comfortable with that? Do you feel like your child's going to be safe with that? Are you going to check in on them to see what they're doing with the app? I once had a child tell me, it was a parent tell me a great idea they do. And they said, I actually got my kid to give me all the passwords to every social network app they have. I'm like, wow, that's amazing. How did you come along? They said, well, I told my child to write down the name of the app, their username and password, and put it on a piece of paper, put it in an envelope, seal it, and write for emergency use only.
Oh, that's great.
Child that I wouldn't snoop on them. So that if anything bad were to happen to my child and law enforcement needed access to those accounts, I'd have the access stored away in a safe place for that emergency. And so it's a matter of building trust with our child. See, if our kid's a teenager now, it's going to be very hard to build that trust when they've been using these devices and apps for years, which is why, as I said before, it's so important to talk to our kids when they're young and make sure that they are using the devices and the apps smartly and intelligently and safely. If we start young, they'll always do it. One of the things I like to try to get parents to say, and I don't know if they do it, but Carly, I'm sure when you were a teenager, and I know when I was a teenager, before I left the house, my mom always said to me, don't drink and drive, don't do drugs. And it was easy to say because my parents had been told that, I guess, but it was easy for them. We need to say, pause before you post, or think before you post, something internet related. Because if we say it 50, 100 times, it might actually be in the back of our kids' head before they hit send and before they share something. It's important that we get this nomenclature into our kids' heads and lives, and that we're aware of it. Because if we're not, they won't be.
Yeah, absolutely. We actually just had one of our investigators, Mo from Virginia, just wrote, she said, I wish I could tell parents how to parent, but I just give tips on how to parent my child. So really good to lead by example. I think it's kind of the same when we're teaching our kids, it's really leading by example and then seeing how the best way to do it. And hopefully our friends, parents as well, you can really be kind of a leader in what the best practices are when it comes to the
Put them down at the dinner table. The kids won't do it either.
Also, with this whole COVID era and everything shifting so virtually, I know I talked to you and you're doing all your court proceedings and everything through Zoom meetings. Children have really shifted everything to being online more. So a lot of online learning as well. It's just being home more and being on electronics more than they were before. But do you see an increase in activity since this is going on?
Yeah, you know, I've received information from the National Center of Missing and Exploited Children, locally from the Palm Beach County Sheriff's Office, from federal agencies, that the numbers are up. Kids are online, parents are working from home, but they might as well be in different places. And, you know, listen, every county is going to do something different come the fall, whether we're going virtual, partially virtual, not virtual, starting on time, not starting on time. We have now the next 4 weeks to get ready. And we should really take this time to educate our kids, because predators know this too. They watch the news, they know kids are home and more apt to be using their devices at a much larger rate. So we've got to give our kids those tools so that when school starts and they're bored in their history class and they start texting somebody, it's not a predator.
Yeah, absolutely. And one of the coolest things, this was years and years ago when the cloud first came out. I remember seeing you, I mentioned that you've been one of my heroes in child exploitation, and you working in your position to fight when the state of Florida, when cloud first became a thing, when people started downloading documents on the cloud. And so you fought with, I think, a whole team of people, but to change those laws to make sure that if a predator is in possession of an illegal file in the cloud, it's still a possession charge, because it was almost like a loophole that they were getting around those charges. So you could tell us a little bit more about that, and also to make it relevant to today's times, are there still laws that are out there that need to be changed, or that we're working to be in a better position to identifying predators and keep kids safe?
Yeah. So back in 2012, we had a case when I was a state prosecutor that although we were able to charge the individual, there was so much material that he had stored in the cloud. And proving possession of material that you don't physically have is very hard. I looked around and I saw that the federal government and some other states had laws that allowed prosecution for accessing with the intent to view. It was akin to possession, but it just thought about the cloud. So I went to my boss at the time and I said, hey, we got to fix this. So he said, well, write the law. So we did, and we went up to Tallahassee and didn't get a single no vote against it. And it was signed into law that year by Governor Charlie Crist at the time. And it's still the law. And as many states since then have done the same. And it's great. You know, it's interesting. A lot of the laws that we use in criminal prosecutions, when it comes to anything online, were built before the cloud, before iPhones, before any of the technology we use nowadays. And so on the federal government level, the Congress has done a wonderful job updating the laws to try to deal with that. I think about a year and a half ago, the Cloud Act was passed specifically to deal with that kind of information, what service providers hold and how we can get access to that through judicial means. But there are so many laws that probably do need to be updated with the times. The problem is every 5 years a new technology comes out and we have to try to address it. So just wait till holograms come out, then what will we do, right? But we're trying to deal with it as best we can. Federally, the laws are very, very, very tough. If an individual distributes or receives child sexual abuse material, they're facing a minimum 5-year prison sentence. If they produce it, it's a minimum 15-year prison sentence. If they solicit a child online, they're facing a minimum sentence of 10 years to a maximum of life. We take these cases very seriously, and the punishments are substantial.
I'm glad you mentioned that, of what type of sentencing that they're getting, because that's a question that we get all the time. Is we at Child Rescue Coalition, we're identifying all these predators, officers are arresting them, but it's the courts really taking this seriously. And just to look at your court and the sentencing that you guys are getting, it's really amazing. And the answer is yes, that you guys are getting really strong convictions and really putting these people behind bars for a very long time.
Yeah, listen, when it comes to sentencing, there are really, and I'm probably, my numbers don't exactly match, but there's really 51 jurisdictions, because you have 50 states and the federal government, and every state laws are different. Every state's punishment level is different. The federal punishment level is the same throughout the country, but the beauty of our democracy is that judges are independent and they can rule based upon what they feel is appropriate. And so they have that purview and that right and that obligation, really. But like I said before, some of the crimes do have minimum mandatory sentences. And those were put in place because Congress believes and found that these individuals are dangerous. And when individuals receive 5, 10, 15-year sentences at a minimum, but usually the sentences are higher than that, we're trying to send the message throughout the country and throughout the world that if you promulgate child sexual abuse material, if you're going to offend against a child online, you're going to be punished substantially. And I think that's a very important message, not just for offenders to know, so maybe they'll think twice about committing it, but for victims and children and parents to know, so that they do come forward knowing that their voice is not going to go unheard.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Greg, so much. I'm gonna see if we have any more questions here, but I definitely am seeing a lot of comments of people just saying how important information is, how much they've learned. I knew I picked you to be our first speaker of this summer safety series because I had learned so much from you, and I knew our viewers would just get so many great tips. But let's see if there's any more questions. Let's see. One comment, I feel like parents just can't think that this won't happen to their kids and really don't take this seriously enough. So really great information that we're sharing, that really this can be happening anywhere around the world.
Yeah, let me make a comment on that. I have had victims from all walks of life. They come from poor families, they come from exceptionally wealthy families. They come from every race, sexual orientation, gender, religion. Any child can be a victim of this. There is no subset of child that is safe from this. Even if you lay every ground rule in your house, you don't give your children devices to have personally, they can go to their friend's house, maybe not now, but everybody's online because of COVID-19. They all have to have access to devices now. So we all have to get up, as Child Rescue Coalition likes to say, join the fight and really try to protect our kids. Because if we as parents don't do it, no one else is going to be on the front lines with them. We have to do it as a joint effort.
Yes, that's absolutely true. And we do want to say to everyone who's watching, we are a nonprofit organization. We really count on you guys. So all the donations and funding goes to support training officers and protecting our children. I am so passionate about this. I actually work full-time for free. I don't take a salary. And we have really a professional team of experts as well as a large team of law enforcement that's working solely to identifying these predators and putting a stop to them. So to date, we've actually arrested over 12,000 child predators, and we're working in countries all around the world. In all 50 states, we have officers trained on our tool. But we really couldn't do it without you, without people supporting our cause and our community. So please consider donating. I also wanted to let people know that we're doing a virtual race. So we're actually starting it in a couple of days where it's our hashtag join the fight. So you talked about that. We want to have people join. But it's our virtual race that's actually sponsored by TransUnion. That is one of our largest and most wonderful corporate sponsors. Their core mission is technology for good, and they believe that Child Rescue Coalition really is the true example of information for good. So we really appreciate that they're sponsoring our virtual race. I think Greg's even going to join, hopefully with his family, and be out there biking. But you can bike, run, swim, do any kind of activity, and it's all raising funds for the organization. So please sign up, share that with your friends. And it's going to be fun. It's hopefully going to get me into exercise mode for the summer, because we all need that being home and virtual. So please register in the comments for our virtual race. But thank you, Greg, so much. This has been amazing information. We really appreciate it. You are just a wealth of knowledge, and thank you so much. And I hope you guys sign up for our next speaker series. It's actually going to be August 11th with Dr. Chad Rudnick, who is a pediatric doctor who is going to be talking about general safety tips for children, as what they should be doing over the summer to keep kids safe, and even talking about online, what they can be doing that are safe activities and family-friendly activities for the whole family. Greg, thank you so much. This has been wonderful. Thank you to all of our viewers, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks so much, Carly. Really appreciate you having me.